So this is a pronoun sorting and loving project for Allan Kaprow, Performativity 2. And in this piece, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort the books in my library by pronoun, and specifically by the pronouns that appear on the covers of the book, playing with the idea that you can't judge a book by its cover. I'm going to determine whether you can judge the book's pronoun by the pronouns that appear on the cover. And if there aren't any pronouns on the cover, I'll assume that those are the books that one can't judge by their covers. And the others, at least in terms of pronominalization, can be judged by their covers. So those are the first two elements going in, a familiar phrase and then the pronoun sorting that we've already begun. And then, of course, the dual activity performance element that goes into a lot of work. For example, the way that I'm attempting to narrate the description of the piece and to perform an entirely different task, which is recalling and designating all of these pronouns simultaneously. And I should probably say something about the history of my library. And the reason that I should say something about the history of my library and what a small library it is at this time is I was thinking about this piece. Let me make sure that I have all of the pronouns here. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, the reason that I was thinking about talking about the history of my library and its size at this time is because, in addition to sorting the library into pronouns by by judgments that can be made of them from their covers. I was also thinking about this essay by Walter Benjamin, one of my favorite essays of all time, called Unpacking My Library. And probably the reason that, I want to unpack this library in a similar way to the way that, in addition to sorting my pronoun, to unpack it in a similar way that Walter Benjamin sorts his library in this particular essay. And what makes it interesting to me is that he sorts his library in Unpacking by collections, and well, specifically by collecting how he acquired, how, when and why he acquired certain volumes in his library, and gives this act of acquiring a socio-political, significance and historical significance, and relates it to the psychology of collecting, and the psychology of reading, and the psychology of belonging, and the psychology of identifying, and so it's very much in keeping with the kinds of performance themes that I work with all the time. And I liked this idea of sorting by collecting, because both sorting and collecting are two major domains of my performance work. So in addition to sorting by pronoun, those books that can be sorted by pronoun and identified by what is seen on their covers, at least in this dimension, I will also discuss in terms of what I remember of acquiring them, which may be limited, and I'll explain that limitation in describing the history of my library. So you'll see that the library is small. There are a few books in the living room that are excluded, but those I'm engaged in right now, and we don't need to worry about them too much. But the bulk of the library is limited to these three bookcases, and they're very small bookcases. And the history of the library, the history of the loss of certain elements of the library begins, I suppose, in around 1992, when my wife and I moved to New York for the first time, and we had to leave a considerable amount of the library behind. But I had moved to New York to begin graduate school in comparative literature, and the library grew. And then my wife also was going to school, and she was doing first undergraduate work in history, and then a little bit of graduate work in history, and a lot of graduate work in the philosophy of education. So in that period that we were in New York, the library actually grew beyond the volume that had existed when we had moved and excised some of the volumes in 1992. So the heyday of the library was probably somewhere around 2005 in New York, before we moved back to California. And at that point, again, we had to reduce the size of the library. We couldn't afford to move all of the volumes back. So that was 2005, and one of the reasons that we had to move was because I was finding it really difficult to get a job in New York,
And one of the obstacles was that well, I had difficulties all along the way that are complex, but much of which has to do with this limitation that I've described before as belonging to the domain of dysgraphia. It's actually more complicated than that, and it involves aspects of dyscalculia and sequencing, and sequencing in a way that is interesting in relationship to volumes in libraries and other kinds of sorting. But that was the impetus for the move back to California, and so the library was reduced at that time. And then because of more economic difficulties, sometime around 2010, my wife and I experienced a period of homelessness in which we lost pretty much everything that we had, other than a vehicle and a few remnants. So most of the art that I had created up to that point, unless it was on the internet or somewhere else, which later I lost most of that as well. We lost. So what we had was a few clothes, a car, and a feral cat that we had managed to domesticate, named Kali. And so at that point the library no longer existed at all. And then with these few clothes and a vehicle and a feral cat that we had domesticated named Kali, we moved to Round Rock, Arizona, on the Navajo Nation with only that, and had that was around let's see, that was around 2012, and then of course at that point we began a new library, which was augmented with some of my mother's books after my mother passed away in 2015. We left the Navajo Nation and then spent some time in her house in Santa Fe, New Mexico, until we lost that house, because we lost our homeowner's insurance because we had moved some foundling, res dogs, who had also been feral when we found them in various states of injury and abandonment, and but apparently these dogs are problematic for insurance purposes, and so anyway, we had to leave some books behind when we acquired a new property in California that we thought would be safe, for them. It turned out not to be so much, but at that point, I guess we had gotten used to the idea of a shape-shifting library and the idea of having less. So at this time, most of the volumes that I have, I mean, there's really a lot of history in them, and some of them I don't even know, but many of them have been acquired from thrift stores and used bookstores, and for economic purposes, as well as because I really enjoy going to these kinds of bookstores, as did Walter Benjamin. But that's an explanation of the rather shallow size and
lightweight dimensions of the library, which in some ways makes it easier, you know, to sort the items in the library. So what I'll do is begin by sorting these volumes by pronoun, and along the way, you know, I'll recount, if I can recall, you know, when and how each of these volumes that can be sorted by pronoun were acquired, or if I can't remember, I might speculate on how they might have been acquired. All right, so this one doesn't seem to have any pronouns on the front. Maybe there are some pronouns on the back. There's a possessive pronoun, but I didn't use possessive pronouns. Okay, well there's one of the pronouns that I did use. I should have included possessive pronouns in our sorting, but it didn't occur to me, because if I had, then the first pronoun would have been ours and it would have belonged to the us, we, but since I didn't, well, this is another possessive pronoun, isn't it? It could be there. Could have been he or him as well. I really should have put the possessive pronouns in. Himself. All right, so already we're faced with an obstacle because I didn't put possessive pronouns in our collection of sortable designations. And high five. And because I didn't do that, we're faced with a problem, unless I can find all right, okay, wait a minute, hold on. All right, here's one that's not a possessive pronoun. So obviously this could have been sorted into a number of different categories if I had organized the categories differently, but I didn't organize the categories differently. I didn't include possessive pronouns. So this particular volume goes here. Now, let's see if I can remember where this particular volume was purchased or acquired. Obviously, it's interesting, the designations here. Obviously, it was acquired in a used bookstore, but I honestly don't remember where and when. I'm trying to imagine the possibilities. The designation gives away something that it's interesting to me, that the major designation here is Native American. For me, the major designation obviously would have been poetry, but that's not the case. So I have to imagine that this was acquired somewhere provincial and a bit backwards. And I'm gonna want to say somewhere in Southern California, maybe in the backcountry, maybe sure. It's possible this was acquired. There is a used bookstore in Julian, California that this could have been acquired in. But I'm not sure. It could have been acquired in Santa Fe when I was there, but I very much doubt it, because I think it would have a different designation. It could have been acquired in a thrift store run by ARC in Farmington, New Mexico. That's another possibility. I'm considering that as a probable possibility. Okay, so a little Calvino. We'll have a lot of Calvino because Calvino is one of my favorite authors. And almost all of the Calvino was acquired probably, mail order. And it may have been while I was still... Now, I don't use Amazon.com anymore because of the politics of Amazon's, response to the COVID crisis, and also, how difficult they make it to unionize. I'm not a big fan of Jeff Bezos, as listeners to my my YouTube channel will be well aware, but this may have been acquired prior to my boycott of all things Amazon.com. It may not have been acquired prior to that either, but was probably acquired online, unless it was acquired. Nothing would have survived from New York, so it had to be acquired late. And I know I had these when Lori and I were living in Round Rock, Arizona, and that was from around 2006, around 2012 to 2016. So within that period of 4 years, I know it was there. So it may have been acquired online from a separate source than Amazon at that time. Let's see where this is going to go. Okay, so there's another pronoun that we didn't include. So you can see how sorting and where you end up depends on what you include and allow. Here's another. What you include and allow in your categories of sorting material. Okay, there's an it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put this in it. All right. Let's see. Here's another. This also may have been acquired in Farmington, New Mexico at ARC, or perhaps, I know it didn't belong to my mother's collection, but I could have purchased it when I was in Santa Fe. Now, the fact that it doesn't say Native American
represents to me the fact that, this is a little less provincial,
has a little less provincial history, and then I know that it has some marginalia. Marginalia is usually a sign of attentiveness and not so much necessarily scholarship, but at least an interest in understanding and education. Students often put marginalia. This one looks interesting. Let's see. I can't get that in focus, but it says the heart of the something. The heart of the maiden is counter. I can't read the counter something. And then, but that counter, maybe it's not counter. And then that's placed, that word that I can't quite make out. The heart of the maiden is something, in quotation marks. And then it says trickster / cunning. Interesting. All right, so it's okay, that's possessive. And we didn't sort by possessive, but there's another it. So this also goes in this category. All right. So far we have it and we have it and they, them. Surprising number of it's, actually. All right. Let's see. It's interesting to me that we're only using 2 of these categories so far. Now this is a relatively new acquisition from, I believe that this was also purchased online from some distributor other than Amazon, because I believe our boycotting Amazon preceded the arrival of this book, and I'm positive that this was purchased online and delivered to us while we were in Nashchidi. New Mexico, also on the Navajo Nation. Our, so there's a possessive, but we didn't use possessives. She, all right. I'm glad this is this falls under she, for a number of reasons. But, you know, partly relating to the importance of women's experience in this particular author, and particularly, you know, obviously, you know, African American women's experience, you know, in this particular author. So I'm glad that we can place this one under she. And let's see. I can see already that we're not going to get very far in our sorting before we'll have to quit, because we've already exceeded 32 minutes, and I can really only go about up to an hour with the internet connection that I have, and get this up onto YouTube. This one, I'm guessing, was acquired in Farmington as well, probably at ARC. At one point, ARC, which is an organization that both hires and provides, you know, other resources and donations to individuals with disabilities, and the one that we used to frequent was in Farmington, New Mexico. At one point, all of the books that they collected, they began to give me for free. I would come in and I would buy other things from them, and the books they wouldn't charge me for. And I don't know, the price though here is excessive for something that ARC would have designated. I can't imagine that. So this must have been purchased elsewhere, because that $7.95, their books, even, you know, really quality books, were very, very inexpensive, and it was one of my favorite, you know, places to frequent in Farmington. I'm not a huge fan of Farmington, New Mexico, but this particular thrift store was fantastic, and also it was a pleasure, you know, conversing with the workers in that particular store and location, and usually some interesting customers as well, and very big open space. Highly recommended. So the price though, it really poses an obstacle to my reading of you know, where I might have acquired this particular book. So it could be Santa Fe as well. That high price, you know, suggests maybe, you know, somewhere with a larger, you know, middle class, you know, population than Farmington, New Mexico had, and I would suspect Santa Fe then. All right, so did we find a pronoun? I. Okay, so I. This is an I book. So I mean, and it really is an I book, right? It's like astrology. Astrology is all about, like, you know, the ego, right? Like, who am I? And that's why everybody loves it, because it's like a fortune cookie. Like, tell me about myself, right? And it doesn't really matter. The human psychology is such as this. If you're told that you're being told about yourself, you'll find yourself in it, right? So that's why it's so appealing, the ego trip of astrology. All right, so put this over here in the I file. This is another one that I'm almost positive was, I think all of the Butler was acquired, or reacquired, because with all of the losses and our library and all of the changes to the library over time, then one reacquires sometimes books that one had in different forms or different volumes and collections, but because one is still interested in those books. So her, I really wish I would have included possessive pronouns in our sorting, but once the categories are made, that's how it works. If there's no place for you to be sorted, you get sorted outside. So we didn't include these types of pronouns either, the herselfs, myselfs, themselves. The self-reflective pronouns we didn't. Okay, there's a she. Good. So it's interesting that only Octavia Butler seems to be getting sorted into she. That's so interesting to me. Well, no. Okay. All right. So this definitively, I know where this comes from. This was one of my mother's books. I know this was one of my mother's books. I probably wouldn't buy a collection like this, but I like that she did, and that she had it in her library. So this is one of the books from her library that I kept, and so this book entered my library after my mother died. In 2015, and my wife and I, had to leave the Navajo Nation to go to her property in Santa Fe, and to take care of all of the elements of the estate, and so this volume belongs to that moment, when we moved there with the res dogs, before we effectively had to find a new home for them, because they were deemed problematic animals, and we lost our home, her homeowner's insurance on that place, and also the bank, Wells Fargo. We had all kinds of problems with them. Initially, the first problem was that they wouldn't, let us take over even though we had, inherited enough money to do so, but they wouldn't let us take over the loan, because we didn't have whatever proper credit. And then we weren't even allowed, like, to make payments. The payments were overdue because, she had passed away, and then there's all this legal stuff and trying to get her, she didn't own the house outright. She still had a mortgage on it, and it was really problematic. It was too difficult, really, to deal with, and I would certainly never use Wells Fargo again. I had felt like basically they, made a pretty aggressive attempt, to steal the home from us, and that was unpleasant and certainly disturbing. So this was acquired at that time. I actually like this volume. It's one of those books that I would never have purchased on my own, but quite like, and I like the history of it because it belonged to my mother as well. All right, so we're going to look for a pronoun. You. That's a good one. This is you. This sorting is really taking a lot longer than I had imagined. Okay, now this one's not mine. This is my wife Lori's book. Because she's a teacher, she has a lot of children's books. Artemis Fowl, obviously this belongs to the Harry Potter series, if I'm not mistaken. I like that the word owl is in here. And I have no idea, when or how she acquired this volume. I know why, but I have no idea when or how. Let's see if we have a pronoun. Who? That's another one that we didn't, another pronoun that we didn't use. These. He. Artemis Fowl thinks he. You can't probably see that, but there's the he. So this is the first he. Oh, this is interesting. So, is Artemis Fowl part of Harry Potter? I don't know, maybe not, because that's what I had assumed, and then I didn't even notice that the author is Ewan Colfer. This is not a spin-off of the Harry Potter, I don't believe. Obviously, it's a spin-off of that, the success of that particular, magical genre. Right. Interesting. So he. Okay, this is This looks like a children's book to me, so I'm going to assume that this is Lori's book, and again, I have no idea when it might have been acquired. This one belongs here with you, Finding Dorothy. This one's easy, isn't it? Okay, so this is Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus, and I know where this was acquired. This was acquired in the Goodwill in Gallup, New Mexico. Also, when we were living in Noshchity, so that's the tail end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021 sometime. And I was doing a lot of work with a big stone at that time, and I had done stacking pieces, a lot of stacking pieces, beginning from childhood. But and these stacking pieces involved it's just kind of a form of prayer and memory in which you mourn or hope or request or record a desire for change or just in terms of the remembering, you record a moment in the act of composing a stacking of stones, and they can be done as memorials or they can be done as requests, and these were requests that I had done in Noshchity, requests for clean environment, including free of the contamination of toxic uranium, because there's a lot of radioactive contamination and contagion in this part of the Navajo Nation, because uranium was mined, in the great, nuclear age following the destruction of, part of our world by nuclear material, and and all of the profit-bearing industry that could be maintained by exploiting this resource. And as a result, Navajo people on the Navajo Nation and other Native Americans in the area continue to suffer the deleterious effects of this exploitation of this particular quote unquote resource. And so while we're in Noshchity, the stones that had been stacked stones, but because there were so many young children in the area, that I was concerned that they could be hurt, by the stacked stones if the stones were to fall, if the children would, play near them. So that they, just became a line of stones, and an arroyo that, eventually will, wash them all away when there's enough rain, if there's enough rain in our world, following this period of increased, global devastation caused by climate change, that so many individuals continued to deny, even though we knew in some way that this was happening. At least I remember knowing as early as 1970 that this was happening. And so anyway, this was acquired at the same time that I was working with, large, heavy stones as requests, or you could say prayers, for and I request for assistance in creating a world and an environment, free of these, toxins. And I wanted it to be big, big enough that it could be, seen from the sky, and a number of reasons for it being, the value of it being seen from the sky. I won't get into all of that there. I'm not finding a pronoun. I don't think, I'm not sure this book can be judged by its cover. Unless I'm just missing it. There's the who again, but we didn't include who. And we can't edit now because we have a system, and we can't violate the system once it's in place. That's the way that sorting works. All right, so this particular book and we'll end here because we're approaching, we're over 55 minutes, and we're approaching what I like to concede to as a time limit, which is an hour, although I sometimes exceed that. But for purposes of getting this up, we'll end here, and we can sort some more at a different time. But this particular book, as I was saying, apparently can't be judged by its cover, at least not so far as pronouns are concerned.